In order to protect his daughter, his parents imprisoned him in a machine less than 10 square meters. Even when they sent him supplies every day, they would stay far away from him. They couldn't have any contact with him because his daughter has dysentery since childhood. He could only breathe the air filtered by the purifier. He thought he would stay in this coffin for the rest of his life, but he didn't expect an accident. The purifier was on fire for no reason that day. What's more terrible was that they found it through the glass. A yellow stream suddenly flowed out on the street, and these streams were all discharged from the sewer in the city. All those who didn't pay attention to it fell to the ground. The father on the street was stunned, but he didn't wait for him to walk a few steps. He saw a bigger stream coming this way. It was just a blink of an eye, and he was about to die. The street was in a mess. The man ran to his home desperately. When he came home, he hurriedly pulled his wife away from the window. In a second, the purifier suddenly burned out the window, and they had nowhere to go. They went straight into the house through the gap. Fortunately, his daughter was protected by the purifier. After the man adjusted the purifier to the power-saving mode, he hurriedly pulled his wife away. Seeing that the purifier was coming upstairs rapidly, they could only run to the higher floor. In the end, the couple came to the top floor. It was an old couple who lived in this house. They let them in without any difficulty. The mother hurriedly took out the intercom to ask about her daughter's situation. When they found out that she was fine, they lost their temper. Then they came to the balcony. They couldn't say anything because of the terrible scene under their feet. But this was not the most terrible thing. Then the man climbed to the roof and looked around. He only saw that the whole city was covered with poison. It seemed that there was a murder in the fairyland, and the poison caused the power outage. Although the girl was fine in the purifier, the power supply of the spare battery could not last through the night. So the man was going to hold his breath and change the battery downstairs for his daughter. He came downstairs and tested the smoke. Although the gas was colorless and tasteless, it was poisonous, and it took more than 10 minutes to change the battery back and forth. A man couldn't hold his breath for so long. Then the man suddenly thought that there was a big house downstairs with oxygen tanks. For the sake of his daughter's safety, he decided to climb down along the pipe. When he was about to enter the toxic gas, the man took a deep breath. Then he held his breath and came to the target's attic soon after. When he opened the window, he successfully entered the big house. When he was about to search, he saw a man lying on the ground. The man stepped forward and found that he was the neighbor, but he was out of breath. The man had no time to feel sad because he was about to die. What was worse was that the big house usually carried oxygen tanks with him, but he was not around at that time. The man was in a hurry. He hurriedly took out a flashlight and searched everywhere, but he couldn't find it. When the man was about to suffocate, he finally found an oxygen tank in a corner. Then he was in a hurry and put on an oxygen mask. Then he quickly opened the door and finally inhaled the oxygen at the last moment. After a while, he put an extra oxygen tank in it. When he was about to leave, he suddenly heard the sound of the bedroom. Under the curiosity, the man raised the hammer and opened the door. Then he found that it was a puppy. But strangely, the puppy was not only out of breath, but also very excited. Is the animal immune to toxic gas? But soon after, he denied this theory, because the mother of the dog in the room died. Although he was confused, the man didn't have much time to think. As soon as he came home, he successfully changed the spare battery for his daughter. He also brought some daily necessities to find more batteries to spare. Then he came downstairs again. He only saw the quiet street, which was very quiet. Looking at them, the man unconsciously took out the oxygen mask. Then he got into the car and collected a lot of spare batteries. When the man was about to leave, he suddenly heard a whistle. He was curious and walked over. He only saw a huge team approaching here. The man went up to ask and learned that they were sent by the army to transfer the survivors. Now the whole city has fallen. The superior decided to search the city and seal the city. While talking, the captain saw that the oxygen bottle the man was wearing was missing. He took out a pure oxygen bottle and changed it for him. Then he told the man to hurry up and catch up with the army. But the man couldn't leave because his family was still here. The captain had no choice but to turn around. At this time, the man called the captain again and asked for another set of oxygen equipment. He also told him about his daughter's condition. Although the equipment was extremely expensive, the captain gave him another set in the end. When he went back, the man was horrified to find that the height of the toxic gas was still rising. If he continued to stay here, he would be poisoned to death sooner or later. They had to escape here with their daughter, and the daughter had to wear a spacesuit to get out. But the spacesuit was far away in the lab in the city center. But at this time, the couple decided to take the risk and went to the spacesuit. When they knew that their parents were going to the city center, their daughter asked them to visit her friends. Her friends, like her, also suffered from pneumonia, and their parents were not at home for many years. They firmly refused their daughter's request. Because now everyone is in danger in this situation, they have no obligation to help other people's children. Mom, if it were the other way around, wouldn't you like your parents to do it for me? The couple was helpless. But in the end, they still promised their daughter to take a look. But the strange thing was that after they came to the boy's house, they found that there was no one inside. Because the oxygen was about to run out, they didn't have much time to think. Then they came to the lab very quickly and found the spacesuit. Then they took the box and were about to leave. Unexpectedly, the lab exploded. Fortunately, they woke up soon, but the man suddenly felt that he couldn't get up. Then he found that the oxygen pipe was broken. Now there is only one oxygen bottle. The couple can only use it back and forth. They have to carry a heavy spacesuit. They walked all the way. I don't know how long it took to get to the top. What's worse, the oxygen was about to run out. In this way, both of them would die here. So the man decided to let his wife go back first. He would find a way to go home later. His wife was reluctant because she knew that her husband would die if she lost the oxygen bottle. But when she thought of her daughter, she still had tears in her eyes and left. But she never thought that this separation would last forever. In order to save oxygen, his wife ran crazily in the street. Unexpectedly, the oxygen didn't last until she rushed home. Time was urgent. She quickly took off the oxygen bottle. Then she held her breath. It was hard to drag the box to the top of the tower. Fortunately, she finally came back, but she didn't expect that the next thing she saw would make her suffocate. She only saw the spacesuit was burned by the explosion. She was busy for a long time, but there was nothing to do. The woman was desperate. On the other side, the man was still climbing the roof, but he saw a dead man. A long bloodstain was obviously killed. The man looked at the bloodstain and walked towards it. There were indeed traces of people living in it. In addition to the supplies, there were also oxygen bottles. He checked again to make sure there was no one nearby. Then he took the oxygen bottle and prepared to take it back. But before he walked out of the door, a man in a police uniform walked in and warned him to put the oxygen bottle down. The man was desperate to see that the oxygen bottle was not his at all, but the police grabbed it by the weapon in his hand and killed him cruelly for it. Seeing that he was pierced by the police, he decided not to pretend. He slowly touched the gun in his right hand. Unexpectedly, the man who was already prepared saw a symptom. He put on the oxygen mask and pushed the police down into the toxic gas. Then the two of them were fighting. At this time, the pistol accidentally fell to the ground. The police wanted to take the gun, but the man grabbed it from behind. Without the protection of the oxygen mask, he took it in 3 seconds. The man had no blood in his heart. He knew he was not cruel. He stood up and rushed home quickly. His wife, who was waiting for him to go home, suddenly found that the battery in his daughter's purification chamber was about to run out. Her husband was not at home. She lost her mind for a moment, but after a good meeting, her husband was still not back. She decided to take the risk to change the battery for her daughter. Looking at the toxic gas in the corridor, the woman took a deep breath. Then she didn't hesitate to get into the toxic gas. She ran very fast, but it was not as fast as the toxic gas in the morning. She didn't bring an oxygen mask. Her daughter was anxious in the purification chamber, but her mother didn't have time to explain to her. She quickly changed the spare battery. Looking at the toxic gas, she took a deep breath. But in the end, the woman seemed to have foreseen something. Instead of rushing upstairs, she began to pay close attention to her daughter. In the end, under the constant urge of her daughter, her mother was reluctant to leave. I don't know how long before the man finally came. However, looking at the scene in front of him, he was stunned. He couldn't believe he was getting closer. But as the distance got closer, the man's heavy oxygen mask was full of tears. Lying in the corridor, his wife, who had long lost her breath, could no longer move. However, the dead must be strong. Unexpectedly, before the man could get up, his daughter's voice came from the speaker. The man knew he couldn't hide it, and understood that this kind of thing had to be said by himself. But he couldn't open his mouth because he didn't want to admit that his wife had passed away. In the end, the man walked to the balcony and told his daughter the death news. After listening to it, his daughter quietly lurked in the corner and didn't make a sound. For the first time, he felt that he was a burden. Not long after, there was a slight earthquake in the house. It was originally just a slow rise. At this time, it began to rise significantly. It was about to collapse here. The man decided to go out again to try his luck and see if he could find a few protective clothing for the two old men. The old man shook his head with a smile because they didn't have much life. He didn't want to waste the resources of young people anymore. In the end, he pulled the old man's hand and went on his way. Do you really think you had a good life with me? If there is one thing in the world that is true to everyone, it is that I was the happiest man when I lived with you. This man was lucky to find a high-level protective clothing because he was worried that if he rushed back, it would be too slow and cause a big fire. He found a power supply on the side of the road and drove back. However, the power of the poisonous gas was extremely low. In addition, the man was driving very fast. In the next second, a little boy suddenly appeared. The man flinched and his body was thrown away. Unexpectedly, his head was still on the iron bucket. Then he fainted directly. After waking up, he didn't know how long it had been. He took the walkie-talkie to the medical school and called his daughter's name, but the daughter opposite didn't make any sound. When he thought that his daughter might have died in the house, he couldn't move forward for half a step. He desperately leaned on the car and was ready to wait for his death, but suddenly he found that there were two people walking in the white mist. The man couldn't believe it and stood up, and the next scene seemed to be like a dream. He just saw his daughter running around. It turned out that he was looking for the little partner's house. Unexpectedly, he found that their symptoms were immune to poisonous gas. The man was very happy after hearing this, but in the next second, he took his oxygen mask. "Dad, what are you doing?" Then in the confusion of his daughter's face, the man kissed his daughter's face for the first time. The last funny thing was that when he woke up again, he found that he had exchanged identities with his daughter. This time, the man lying in the purification chamber changed into himself, and his daughter